The Galactic Union had been at war with the Drelkoth for years. It was a war no one thought they would lose, but now, it seemed like the end was near. Entire civilizations had fallen. Cities that once hummed with life were now nothing but piles of ash and rubble. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if even the universe was mourning the destruction. The Drelkoth, a brutal and efficient alien race, were unstoppable. They crushed their enemies without hesitation, and their war machine showed no signs of slowing down. On one of the Union's last standing worlds, the Resistance had gathered. They were the last hope of the galaxy, the final group to keep fighting. But even they knew it was a losing battle. Their ships were outmatched, their resources stretched thin, and their soldiers were exhausted. Yet they fought on. They had to. The fate of the galaxy was at stake. The Resistance's leaders huddled around a small, dimly lit table in their underground command center. The map of the galaxy, once filled with vibrant colors representing the Union's territories, now showed only patches of red, the locations the Drelkoth had already conquered. The rest of the map was black, symbolizing the unknown, the empty, the lost. How much longer can we hold out? General Talon, the leader of the Resistance, asked. His voice was weary, strained. His once proud figure had been bent under the weight of countless battles. His eyes had lost their usual fire. He had seen too much death, too much destruction. "We can't hold much longer," said Captain Lyra, his second in command. Her face was tight with worry. She had seen the faces of the soldiers who followed her, young, old, wounded, or tired. But all of them were fighting with every last ounce of strength they had. She had to be the one to keep their hope alive, but it was becoming harder each day. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and we've lost contact with our allies." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Drelkoth had severed their communication networks, isolating the Resistance from the rest of the galaxy. The galaxy was now divided, and the Resistance was alone. General Talon looked at his team, his heart heavy with the burden of leadership. He had to make a decision. But what choice did he have left? They had fought for years, hoping for a miracle, but now it seemed impossible. The last of their fleet had just been destroyed in a desperate raid against the Drelkoth's main stronghold. The Resistance was on the brink of collapse. "Is there any hope left?" asked a voice from the back of the room. It was Commander Finn, a veteran of the old wars. His face was scared, his eyes distant. He had seen more than most, and he had lived through things that would break others. But even he was starting to lose his hope. Talon clenched his fists. "We will fight until the end," he said, his voice steady, though it betrayed the uncertainty in his heart. "But we can't do it alone." There was a long pause, the weight of those words hanging in the air. The galaxy, once so full of life, was now dying. Planets were falling one after another. The Drelkoth had swept through the Union's territories like a storm, crushing all who stood against them. The Resistance, the last line of defense, had been decimated. Lyra turned to the communications officer. "Is there any chance we can send a distress signal to the others? Is there anyone left who can help?" The officer hesitated. His fingers danced over the controls, trying to bypass the jamming signals that the Drelkoth had set up. Finally, he shook his head. "The Drelkoth have blocked every channel. No one can hear us." Talon closed his eyes for a moment, the gravity of the situation settling over him. It was hopeless. The Resistance had done everything they could, but now they were standing at the edge of the abyss. There was no more fight left in the galaxy. "We have one last option," Talon said quietly. "It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." The room fell silent again, everyone looking at him, waiting for the next words to come. Talon continued, "There is an old distress signal that we can send, one that will travel beyond the Drelkoth's reach. We'll send it into the void, hoping someone out there will hear it." A murmur ran through the room. This wasn't like the usual calls for help. This was different, a signal that had been lost to time, a relic of a forgotten era. It was a gamble, but the Resistance had no other options. Lyra nodded grimly. "Send it," she said, her voice firm. "It's the only chance we got left." As the signal was sent, the room fell into an uneasy quiet. No one knew if it would reach anyone. It was a shot in the dark. Hope had almost faded completely, but for the first time in a long while, there was a spark, a faint glimmer that perhaps someone, somewhere, would answer the call. And so, as the final moments of their last stand approached, the resistance held on. They fought, not for themselves, but for the galaxy that still had a chance, if only someone would answer. The days following the sending of the distress signal were long and uncertain. The resistance had done everything they could, but now all they had left was the hope that someone, somewhere, would answer. But as the hours stretched into days, and the days into weeks, that hope began to fade. The stars above their world seemed as cold and distant as ever. General Talon stood at the command center, staring out of the observation window. The lights of the city below flickered dimly, but the usual hum of activity had grown quiet. Everyone knew that time was running out. The Drelkoth were closing in, and the Resistance's resources were nearly depleted. But as he watched the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something waiting. "General," Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to face her. Her expression was somber, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. "We've intercepted a strange signal." Talon raised an eyebrow. "Strange? How?" Lyra handed him a datapad, and as Talon examined it, he saw a series of long-range pulses coming from beyond the galaxy's edge. It was unlike anything they had encountered before, an unknown frequency, yet eerily familiar. "It's human," Lyra said, almost in disbelief. "This signal, it's us. But how?" Talon's heart skipped a beat. The signal was faint but clear. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a beacon, a sign that someone had heard their call. But who? "Are you sure?" Talon asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. Lyra nodded. "I'm certain. It's coming from Earth." The room fell silent. The Resistance had heard stories of humanity, of how they had once been a mighty force in the galaxy before disappearing without a trace. But no one knew exactly what had happened to them. For centuries, Earth had been isolated, its fate a mystery. Most assumed humanity had faded into oblivion. But now, this signal from Earth was more than just a surprise. It was a lifeline. Talon didn't waste a moment. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to Earth." The announcement spread quickly through the Resistance base, and for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of excitement in the air. The idea that humanity might still be out there, ready to fight, gave them all new strength. It was a strange kind of hope, one that felt fragile but real. As the fleet prepared to leave the system, Commander Finn approached Talon. His face was grizzled, and his steps were slow, but there was a fire in his eyes now, one that hadn't been there before. "General, I have to ask," Finn said, his voice steady. "What if this is a trap? What if the Drelkoth are waiting for us?" Talon met his gaze, his expression unwavering. "Then we fight. But I believe in this. We have to believe. If we don't, everything we fought for will be in vain." Finn nodded, but the worry in his eyes remained. The unknown was always a dangerous thing, but the promise of humanity's return was too powerful to ignore. With the fleet ready, the Resistance made its way through the stars, traveling toward the source of the signal. The journey would take several days, and every moment felt like an eternity. The crew was on edge, anxiously watching their scanners and preparing for anything that could come their way. But even in the face of danger, there was a new energy. The Resistance was no longer fighting alone. Humanity, the species that had once been thought lost, was coming back into the fold. As they approached the edge of their galaxy, Talon watched as the stars ahead shifted. The signal was growing stronger. Earth was near, and with it, the unknown power that humanity might bring. The fleet passed through vast stretches of dark space, and in the distance, a blue and white world appeared. Earth. But as they drew closer, something felt strange. The human fleet was not what they had imagined. There were no towering ships, no massive fleets of warships to match the might of the Drelkoth. Instead, there was something different. The human vessels were sleek, advanced, and designed for precision rather than overwhelming force. They were unlike anything the Resistance had seen before. Talon couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and curiosity. The humans had clearly prepared for this moment in ways they hadn't anticipated. Their technology was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. They weren't just going to fight. They were going to show the Drelkoth what humanity was truly capable of. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, a massive ship appeared in the distance, a ship that dwarfed anything the Resistance had ever seen. It was like nothing in the galaxy. Talon's heart raced. This was it. Humanity had returned. And with them, hope had returned too. "General," Lyra said, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's time." Talon nodded, his face determined. This was their chance. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, the Resistance had a fighting chance. The Drelkoth would learn soon enough that humanity had not forgotten how to fight. The massive human ship hovered in Earth's orbit like a giant sentinel, its sleek silhouette cutting through the dark expanse of space. It was unlike anything the Resistance had seen before. Its advanced design was both elegant and powerful. The ship's surface gleamed with an otherworldly shine, reflecting the light of distant stars as it slowly approached the Resistance fleet. General Talon stood at the command center, his eyes fixed on the monitor. The human fleet was now in range, and he could see their ships up close. They were much smaller than the Drelkoth warships, but they exuded a quiet confidence. These were not the towering, imposing vessels of the past. They were fast, agile, and clearly built for precision. Lyra, standing beside him, studied the human ships with equal curiosity. "They don't look like they're prepared for a large-scale battle," she said, her voice filled with doubt. "Are they really ready to fight the Drelkoth?" Talon glanced at her, his expression firm. "They've been gone for a long time, but humanity never forgot how to fight. This is just the beginning." He turned back to the monitor as a communication signal came through from the massive human ship. A face appeared on the screen, a man with short cropped hair, a strong jaw, and sharp eyes. He wore a military uniform, the insignia of Earth's military proudly displayed on his chest. Despite the stern look on his face, there was a calmness in his eyes that spoke of experience and resolve. "This is Captain Ilara of the human fleet," the man said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "General Talon, we've received your signal. We're here to help." Talon felt a wave of relief wash over him. The humans had arrived, and they were ready to fight. "We're grateful for your help, Captain," Talon replied, his voice filled with respect. "But we're facing a threat unlike anything we've ever encountered. The Drelkoth are ruthless and determined. We don't know if we have the strength to hold them off for much longer." Captain Ilara's gaze hardened, and he nodded solemnly. "We've heard the stories. The Drelkoth won't be easy to stop, but we've been preparing for this moment. Our technology may be different, but we're not unfamiliar with war." Lyra, still unsure, stepped forward. "What exactly do you have that can help us? We've already lost most of our fleet. We need more than just advanced ships. We need a strategy." Ilara's lips curved into a small smile. "We've got both. The human fleet is equipped with weapons unlike anything you've ever seen. We've developed new energy shields that can absorb and redirect energy blasts. Our ships are faster, more maneuverable, and designed for stealth attacks. We've also perfected drones that can infiltrate enemy ships and disable them from within." Talon's eyes widened in surprise. He had known that the humans had advanced technology, but he hadn't expected anything like this. The idea of stealthy, fast ships and drones that could sabotage the Drelkoth's mighty warships was exactly what they needed. "We'll fight alongside you," Captain Ilara continued, "but we'll need your people to help coordinate the attack. This won't be a solo mission. We need a united front. Talon looked around at his officers. Everyone was listening intently, their faces filled with both hope and apprehension. This was their chance, but it would require careful planning and cooperation. He turned back to Ilara and gave a firm nod. We'll work together. We fought hard to get here, and we won't give up now. We'll need to combine our forces and launch a full-scale assault on the Drelkuth. The human ships were already beginning to move into position, lining up alongside the Resistance fleet. It was a sight that filled Talon with a renewed sense of purpose. The battle ahead would be difficult, but they weren't alone anymore. With humanity's help, they had a chance to win. As the combined fleet prepared to depart, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The human ships were unlike anything she had ever seen. Their design was sleek, almost organic, with smooth lines that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They were compact, but efficient, built for speed and precision. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "The moment we've been waiting for. Together, we can take down the Drelkuth." Talon placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, together. We fight as one. This is our galaxy, and we won't let it fall." The fleet surged forward, the Resistance ships alongside the humans, their combined firepower now a force to be reckoned with. As they left Earth's orbit, Talon couldn't help but look back at the beautiful blue planet below. It had once seemed like a distant memory, a lost world. But now, Earth was the key to their victory. The fleet moved toward the heart of the galaxy, where the Drelkuth stronghold awaited. Talon knew the road ahead would be long, and the battle would be fierce, but for the first time in years, he felt the weight of his hope return. As the fleet entered the dark expanse of space, he glanced at the human ships again. They were ready. They weren't just here to help, they were here to lead. And with humanity's arrival, the galaxy had a fighting chance. The Drelkuth were about to learn that humanity would never give up. The fleet moved forward through the darkness of space, the stars twinkling like distant memories. General Talon stood at the command center, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse ahead. The human ships, sleek and powerful, lined up beside the Resistance fleet, ready for what would be the biggest battle of their lives. The Drelkuth stronghold was within reach, and the time had come to end the war that had torn their world apart. Talon's mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming battle. The Drelkuth were a force unlike any other. Their warships were massive, and their strength was overwhelming. Yet, with the arrival of the human fleet, there was a new sense of hope. The humans had brought advanced technology, and with it, new tactics. They were prepared, and they were not going to back down. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the displays. "General, we've received reports from the scouts. The Drelkuth fleet is waiting for us, but they're not expecting a coordinated attack like this. The human technology is unlike anything we've seen before." Talon nodded. "We'll use that to our advantage. The Drelkuth are strong, but they've never faced an enemy like humanity. We have to strike fast, hit hard, and make them question everything they thought they knew." As the fleet closed in on the Drelkuth stronghold, the tension was palpable. The Resistance soldiers, once filled with doubt, now stood tall with renewed determination. The humans had given them something they hadn't had in years: confidence. "We're ready," Captain Ilara's voice came through the comms, calm but filled with authority. "We'll take the lead. You follow our signals, and we'll work together. This is how we win." Talon gave a quick nod. "Understood. We move as one." The first wave of human ships darted forward, their engines firing with a high-pitched hum. Their speed was unmatched, their agility allowing them to weave through the incoming fire from the Drelkuth warships. The Resistance fleet followed closely behind, their larger ships providing support, but the humans were the true force on the front lines. The battle erupted in a burst of bright energy as the human ships unleashed their advanced weapons. High-energy beams cut through the darkness, striking the Drelkuth ships with precise force. The Drelkoth retaliated, their massive warships firing back with overwhelming firepower. The space around them was filled with flashes of light, as energy blasts and missiles flew in every direction. But the humans were quick. Their ships maneuvered with an almost unnatural grace, dodging the incoming fire and returning with devastating precision. The drones, small but deadly, swooped into enemy ships, disabling their systems and causing chaos within the Drelkoth fleet. Talon watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. The resistance ships followed the humans' lead, working together in a way they never had before. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters, a united force against the enemy. "Keep pushing forward," Talon ordered, his voice steady. "We can't let up now. For every ship that falls, we push harder." Liara worked furiously at the control panel, coordinating the movements of the resistance fleet. "We're making progress, but the Drelkoth aren't backing down. Their flagship is still intact, and it's heavily armored. We need to find a way to disable it." Talon glanced at the human ships, their sleek forms darting through the chaos. They had the firepower, the technology, and the speed. He knew they could do it, but it would require more than just brute force. It would take strategy, precision, and a bit of luck. "That flagship has to go," Talon said, his voice resolute. "We'll focus our fire on their weakest points. Target their engines and communication arrays first. If we cripple their flagship, the rest of the fleet will crumble." Liara nodded, relaying the orders to the resistance fleet. The ships quickly shifted their focus, their weapons aimed directly at the Drelkoth flagship. The human ships continued to provide support, darting in and out of the fray, making it harder for the Drelkoth to target them. The Drelkoth flagship loomed ahead, its massive hull bristling with weapons. The resistance fleet closed in, their weapons charging for the final assault. Talon's heart raced as the distance between them and the flagship closed. This was it, the moment that could change everything. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Liara called out, and the resistance ships released a barrage of fire. Energy beams, missiles, and drones rained down on the Drelkoth flagship, hitting its weak points with deadly accuracy. The Drelkoth flagship shuddered, its shields flickering as the weapons found their mark. The human ships moved in, firing their advanced weapons with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, the Drelkoth warships began to fall, their systems overloaded by the relentless assault. But the flagship was still standing. Talon could see the Drelkoth commanders scrambling, trying to regroup. The Drelkoth were strong, but they were starting to crack. "Captain Ilara," Talon said urgently, "we need your help. The flagship is still fighting back." Ilara's voice came through the comms, steady as ever. "We're on it, General. Stand by." With a swift motion, the human ships dove into the heart of the battle. They were fast, darting in and out of the Drelkoth flagship's fire, targeting its core systems with deadly precision. The resistance fleet followed their lead, pouring everything they had into the flagship. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the flagship's shields collapsed. The ship shuddered, and the massive vessel began to break apart. The Drelkoth fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. The battle was far from over, but the tide had shifted. The resistance and the humans had done it. They had dealt a devastating blow to the Drelkoth. Talon let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The battle had been brutal, but they had survived. And with humanity's help, they had taken the first step toward winning the war. The Drelkoth may have been strong, but now they knew. Humanity was back, and they were not going to let their galaxy fall. The battle had been fierce, but the Drelkoth were retreating. Their once unbreakable fleet was now scattered, crippled by the relentless onslaught of the resistance and the human forces. Yet, despite their victory, General Talon knew this was not the end. The Drelkoth were not easily defeated, and their retreat could be a dangerous move, one that could signal the beginning of something even more deadly. Talon stood at the command center, staring at the holographic map of the battlefield. The human ships were still in formation, their sleek designs cutting through the remnants of the Drulkoth fleet. But Talon's thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the larger picture. The Drulkoth were retreating, but their warships were not all destroyed. Some had vanished into the deep reaches of space, and Talon could only wonder what they were planning. Lyra stood beside him, her face tense as she studied the data on the screen. "General, we've pushed them back, but we've still lost a significant number of ships. If they regroup, they could come back even stronger." Talon nodded, his expression dark. "I know. We've dealt them a heavy blow, but the Drulkoth are never fully beaten until they're wiped out completely. We need to find out where they've gone and stop them before they can regroup." Just then, the voice of Captain Ilara crackled through the comms. "General, we've detected unusual energy readings coming from the edge of the system. It looks like the Drulkoth are hiding something, possibly a new weapon or reinforcements. We need to investigate." Talon's heart skipped a beat. He had feared this. The Drulkoth weren't just retreating. They were preparing for something bigger. "Send out scouts immediately. We need to know what they're up to. And Captain, keep your fleet on high alert. The last thing we need is a surprise attack." As the scouts were deployed to investigate the strange energy readings, Talon couldn't shake the feeling that the Drulkoth were about to unleash something devastating. The victory they had earned seemed fragile, like a thin thread holding them together. The human fleet had been invaluable, but the war was far from over. Hours passed, and the tension grew. The Resistance fleet moved cautiously, wary of the unknown. Talon spent most of the time on the bridge, watching the screens and waiting for any sign of the Drulkoth. He knew that if the enemy had hidden something in the deep reaches of space, it could change the tide of the war. Finally, the scouts returned with unsettling news. "General, we've located the source of the energy readings. It's a Drulkoth flagship, a new design. It's larger, more heavily armed, and appears to be gathering reinforcements. We believe it's preparing to launch a counteroffensive." Talon clenched his fists. "A new flagship. How many ships are with it?" The scout paused before replying. "At least 30 Drulkoth warships are stationed around it. They're reinforcing their defenses as we speak." Lyra looked at Talon, concern in her eyes. "We can't let them regroup. If they launch a counterattack with that flagship, it could be catastrophic." Talon nodded. "We've come too far to back down now. We need to strike first, before they have a chance to organize. Captain Ilara, can your fleet take down that flagship?" Ilara's voice came over the comms. "We're ready, General. We've been waiting for this moment. Our ships are equipped to handle that kind of firepower. But we'll need the Resistance fleet's support to keep the Drulkoth ships distracted while we target the flagship's weak points." Talon didn't hesitate. "Agreed. We'll divide our forces. The Resistance fleet will engage the Drulkoth warships, while the human fleet focuses on the flagship. We need to hit them fast and hard, with no room for mistakes." The fleet moved out, preparing for another clash. The calm before the storm was unnerving. Talon could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was the turning point in the war. If they failed, the Drulkoth would have the upper hand once again. If they succeeded, they could cripple the Drulkoth for good. The human fleet moved forward with speed and precision, their ships darting through the darkness of space. The Resistance fleet followed closely, maintaining formation and readying their weapons. The two forces moved as one, unified in their purpose. As they approached the Drulkoth flagship and its reinforcements, the battle erupted once more. The Drulkoth warships fired first, massive blasts of energy streaking across space. The Resistance fleet returned fire, their weapons glowing as they unleashed everything they had. The human ships darted in and out of the battle, using their speed and agility to stay one step ahead of the Drulkoth. Captain Ilara's fleet was doing what they had trained for, targeting the Drulkoth flagship with unrelenting precision. Energy beams streaked through the void, striking the flagship's shields, causing them to flicker and falter. Talon watched from the command center as the battle unfolded. The Resistance fleet was holding its ground, fighting with everything they had. The human fleet, meanwhile, was carving through the Drelkoth defenses like a blade through paper. But the Drelkoth flagship was still standing, its weapons firing back with brutal force. "We need to bring down those shields," Talon muttered under his breath. "Get the Resistance fleet to concentrate fire on the flagship's engines. That's the only way we'll disable them." Lyra immediately passed on the order, and the Resistance fleet adjusted its focus, unleashing everything they had at the flagship's engines. The Drelkoth flagship shook as the weapons hit their mark. For a moment, it seemed like the ship might falter, but then it fought back harder than ever. The battle was far from over, but Talon could feel the tide beginning to shift. Humanity's arrival had made all the difference. With their help, the Resistance had a real chance to win this war. The only question that remained was, would it be enough? The battle raged on, with explosions lighting up the void of space. The human fleet and the Resistance forces had launched their final attack on the Drelkoth flagship. The once feared warship had been crippled by their combined firepower, but it was still fighting back fiercely. The crew of the human ships knew that this was the moment that would decide everything. If they could destroy the flagship, the war could be over. If they failed, the Drelkoth would reclaim the skies. General Talon stood at the helm of the command center, his eyes focused on the holographic display. His heart pounded in his chest. The battle was reaching its climax, and every decision he made could tip the scales. "We need to hit the core," Talon said, his voice calm but intense. "That's the weak spot. All fire on the Drelkoth flagship's core. Now." The orders were relayed, and the fleet's weapons locked on the vulnerable spot. The human ships, with their speed and agility, darted in and out of the firestorm of battle, avoiding enemy blasts while launching their own. The Resistance fleet, fully committed, continued to press on, distracting the Drelkoth forces with well-placed shots. Lyra, standing beside Talon, could see the desperation in his eyes. They had pushed the Drelkoth to the brink, but the flagship's defenses were still holding strong. The Drelkoth were not going to give up easily. She could hear the steady hum of the command center as everyone worked together, focused entirely on their goal. "General, the Resistance fleet is taking heavy fire," Lyra said. "They're being overwhelmed by Drelkoth reinforcements. If they don't hold out, we won't have a chance to take out the flagship." Talon clenched his fists. His mind raced. The Resistance had already taken heavy losses, and the Drelkoth were pulling out all the stops. They knew that if the flagship fell, their entire fleet would be lost. Talon knew the risks. They had no choice but to keep pushing forward. There was no turning back now. "We won't let them fall," Talon said firmly. "All available human ships, focus on taking down the reinforcements. We need to give the Resistance fleet a chance to finish this." The human fleet responded with speed and precision, cutting through the Drelkoth reinforcements with relentless firepower. The ships danced around enemy fire, using their smaller size and faster engines to avoid the massive blasts from the Drelkoth warships. It was a delicate balance. One wrong move could mean the end of a human ship, but the human crew had trained for this, and they fought with everything they had. The Resistance fleet, though battered, continued to press on. The Drelkoth flagship was their target, and they would not back down. Ilara, commanding her fleet with grit and determination, issued orders to concentrate all fire on the flagship's core. A massive energy blast from the Resistance's main cannon slammed into the flagship's hull, causing a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, and for a moment, it seemed like the flagship might finally be done for. But the Drelkoth were nothing if not resilient. The flagship's core stabilized, and it began to glow with dangerous intensity. The Drelkoth were preparing for one last desperate attempt to turn the tide. "We need to disable that core now," Lyra shouted. Talon nodded. He had one last trick up his sleeve, one he had been saving for just such a moment. "All human ships, prepare for a coordinated attack. We're going in, fast and precise." He turned to Lyra. "We're doing this. Every ship, follow my lead." The human ships moved as one, weaving through the battlefield with deadly precision. Talon's flagship, the Indomitable, led the charge. With all weapons primed, the human fleet made their final push. The Drelkov flagship fired one last barrage of powerful energy beams, but the human fleet was ready. They weaved through the deadly firestorm, staying just out of reach of the enemy weapons. Talon knew that one wrong move, one miscalculation, could cost them everything. They were close now. The flagship's core glowed brighter and brighter as the Drelkov desperately tried to fight off the human attack. Talon gave the order, and the Indomitable fired a direct hit at the flagship's core. The explosion that followed was massive. It lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. The Drelkov flagship's shields failed, and its core imploded in on itself, sending a shockwave of energy that knocked several nearby Drelkov warships out of formation. Talon watched as the Drelkov flagship began to disintegrate, pieces of its hulking structure breaking apart in all directions. The once powerful vessel was now reduced to scrap metal, drifting in the cold void of space. "We did it," Lyra exclaimed, a look of disbelief on her face. "We actually did it." The Resistance fleet cheered as they saw the flagship's destruction, their morale boosted by the sudden shift in the battle. The Drelkov, without their command ship, were disorganized. The remaining warships scattered, their lines broken. The human and Resistance forces, now united and focused, turned their attention to the remaining Drelkov ships. It wasn't over yet, but the tide had decisively turned. The Drelkov were reeling from the loss of their flagship, and the human fleet had struck a blow they would not soon recover from. Talon felt a surge of relief, but he knew they couldn't stop now. The Drelkov still had power, and they would not give up easily. But this was a victory they could build on. This was the beginning of the end. The battle was not over, but they had taken the first real step toward ending the war. And for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope. "Keep pushing forward," Talon said, his voice steady. "We have to finish this." And with that, the final stand had begun. The final remnants of the Drelkov fleets scattered like leaves in the wind. Their once proud warships, massive and unstoppable, now lay in ruins, drifting aimlessly in the cold, empty void of space. The human fleet, along with the Resistance forces, had done it. The Drelkov had been defeated. General Talon stood at the command center of the Indomitable, staring out at the debris-filled expanse. His heart was heavy, but his eyes shone with pride. The victory was hard-earned, and the cost had been great, but they had prevailed. Humanity and its allies had proven that when faced with impossible odds, they would not back down. "We've won," Lyra said quietly from behind him, her voice carrying a sense of awe. "We really did it." Talon nodded slowly. The sound of distant cheers echoed from the various ships of the fleet, but in his mind, all he could think about were the countless lives that had been lost. His own soldiers, the members of the Resistance, families torn apart by war. Their sacrifices had brought them to this moment, but the weight of it all was still fresh in his mind. "It's not over," Talon said, his voice resolute. "We've won a battle, not the war." His eyes shifted to the large holographic map in front of him. The Drelkov were broken, yes, but there were still remnants of their forces scattered throughout the galaxy. Many of their leaders had been destroyed, but others were still out there, waiting for their chance to regroup and strike again. The humans couldn't afford to relax. They needed to keep the pressure on. "We need to make sure they never come back," Talon continued, turning to Lyra. "I want every fleet to check for any survivors. We can't let them regroup." Lyra nodded, her face determined. She had lost friends in the conflict, and she knew that they couldn't let the sacrifices be in vain. The fight was far from over, but this was a turning point. The human spirit had once again proven that nothing could crush it, not even the Drelkov. "We'll do it," Lyra said firmly. "We'll hunt them down." Meanwhile, Ilara, the Resistance commander, stood on the bridge of her own ship, the Liberty, staring at the remains of the Drulkoth flagship. It had been a long and bitter struggle, but her people had fought side by side with humanity, and now they stood victorious. She was filled with both pride and grief. Her comrades who had fallen in the battle would never be forgotten. Their names would live on in the new era that was beginning. "We've made history today," Ilara said, turning to her crew. "We've shown them what unity can accomplish." Her voice echoed through the ship's comms, and the crew cheered. The war had torn their homes apart, but now they had a chance to rebuild. There was hope, something that had been in short supply for so long. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The whole planet erupted in celebration. For years, humanity had been under the shadow of the Drulkoth's tyranny. Now that dark cloud had been shattered. The people gathered in the streets, waving flags, singing songs, and embracing their newfound freedom. It was a moment they had longed for, a moment of triumph. But even as the celebrations began, leaders around the world knew that the real work had only just begun. Rebuilding was going to take time, and the wounds of war would not heal overnight. The cost of victory was high. Yet they were determined to rebuild, to come together as one united people, stronger than ever before. In the following days, the human fleet began to survey the Drulkoth homeworld. They found it desolate, a ghost planet with little left to salvage. The once mighty empire of the Drulkoth was crumbling. There would be no more warships, no more conquests. The galaxy was safe, at least for now. Talon and his crew stood together on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as the last of the Drulkoth vessels were taken into custody. The war had been brutal, but the sacrifices made by so many had allowed humanity to survive. It was time to honor those who had fallen and to look toward the future. "We have to ensure that this never happens again," Talon said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let ourselves forget what we've been through." Layara stepped beside him, her eyes reflecting the same resolve. "We won't. We'll make sure that the galaxy remains a place of peace." The human fleet began to withdraw from the battlefield, its mission complete. The resistance ships, battered but still standing, followed suit. Together, they would continue to work toward a peaceful future. The battle against the Drulkoth was over, but the war for a better future would never truly end. It was up to the new generation of soldiers, engineers, and diplomats to ensure that peace would last. As Talon watched the stars twinkle in the distance, he couldn't help but think of the future. The humans had proven they could overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seemed. And now, as they took their first steps into a new era, he knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology. It was in their hearts, their unyielding will to survive, to fight, and to never give up. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and humanity would make sure it was one worth fighting for.